Think you know the origins of everyday items, like the toothbrush or the humble Post-it note? What if I told you their creation stories involve espionage, accidental discoveries, and even fashion blunders? Get ready to have your mind blown as we unearth the surprising and sometimes scandalous secret histories behind the inventions that shaped our world. In the quiet corridors of human history, before the grand breakthroughs and celebrated inventions, there lived countless minds whose names were rarely spoken aloud. Their ideas did not begin as blueprints or marketable products. They began in the dim corners of curiosity, in frustrations that refused to fade, and in dreams that hovered at the edges of sleep. This first chapter opens with a tangled web of brilliance and obscurity that gave birth to the world's most iconic inventions. It explores not the polished inventions themselves, but the hidden moments, the accidental discoveries, the private failures, and the raw human stories buried beneath the shiny surface of innovation. Long before the electric bulb illuminated the world, light existed only through flickering candles, oil lamps, and fading daytime hours. Humanity's battle with the darkness was ancient, yet the first real spark of modern illumination began with a man who wasn't trying to fight the night. He was simply trying to avoid setting his house on fire. Humphrey Davy, long before Edison was even born, had discovered that electrical sparks could glow. But he did not know that this humble experiment in 1802 would one day ignite a revolution of light. His arc lamp was far too bright and burned out too quickly, but the seed had been planted. Inventions rarely arrive fully formed. They grow like stubborn weeds through generations, nourished by trial and error, disappointment, and persistence. Edison's fame stood on the shoulders of more than 20 inventors who had tried and failed before him, each adding a piece to the puzzle without receiving the credit given to the man who eventually commercialized it. Further back in time, a young German goldsmith named Johannes Gutenberg was less interested in literature and more focused on debt. Crushing financial pressure pushed him to experiment with metal molds and wine presses, searching desperately for something that would save him from ruin. He did not intend to change the world when he invented the printing press. He merely wanted freedom from a future he could no longer afford. Yet his invention, born in desperation, would democratize knowledge and lay the foundation for scientific progress, cultural transformation, and global communication. The hidden truth behind genius is that it often grows not from ambition, but from necessity. Across the world in ancient China, paper was born not from a scholarly pursuit, but from an attempt to solve the messy, inconvenient, and fragile writing materials of the time. Kai Lun, a court eunuch serving the Han Dynasty, pieced together bark, old fishing nets, and scraps of cloth, experimenting with them in water until a new substance emerged, light, strong, and easy to carry. His paper would become one of the most influential inventions in human civilization, but for many years he was remembered only within the palace walls. History rarely honors the inventors at the moment of creation. Time must pass before genius becomes obvious.
In the 19th century, the world began to accelerate. Machines roared, cities expanded, steamships crossed continents, and factories spun from dawn to dusk. This was the age of inventors, restless minds, sleepless dreamers, misfits who refused to live within the limits of their era. But even here, in the golden age of innovation, the hidden stories are far more dramatic than the inventions themselves. Take Alexander Graham Bell, for example. His journey toward the telephone was not driven by the desire to revolutionize communication. Rather, it began with grief. His mother and his wife both suffered hearing problems, and his fascination with the mechanics of sound was deeply personal. Bell's early experiments included strange contraptions of reeds, membranes, and electrical currents that no one believed would amount to anything. Yet it was these fragile prototypes, born from a son's love for his mother, that eventually carried the first spoken words across a wire. Inventors are often portrayed as lonely geniuses working in solitude, but this is rarely true. Behind many iconic creations lies collaboration, rivalry, or sometimes outright theft. The airplane, for instance, was not the exclusive triumph of the Wright brothers. In Brazil, Alberto Santos Dumont was flying publicly before the Wrights revealed their work. In France, early aviation enthusiasts were already designing gliders that soared over village fields. But history chose its heroes, as it often does, based not solely on invention, but on documentation, timing, and narrative. The hidden stories behind inventions are filled with silent contributors whose names have faded, even though their ideas remain embedded in the machines and technologies we use today. As the story of innovation unfolds across continents and centuries, one pattern consistently emerges. The greatest inventions rise from the most unlikely origins. Sometimes they arise from accidents, such as when a chemist named Charles Goodyear accidentally dropped rubber on a hot stove and discovered vulcanization. Sometimes they emerge from irritation, like when a frustrated engineer named George de Mestral pulled burrs off his dog's fur and wondered why they clung so tightly, eventually creating Velcro. Sometimes they are born from tragedy, like the invention of the modern ambulance system after Napoleon's battlefields left wounded soldiers dying without transport. And sometimes they come from overlooked individuals whose brilliance was ignored in their lifetime, like Nikola Tesla, whose unmatched vision of wireless energy remained only partially realized. This first part of the story dives deeper into these hidden beginnings, focusing on the fragile sparks, the secret motivations, the failures, and the overlooked contributions that shaped our modern world. Genius is rarely glamorous in its infancy. It often looks like a mess of broken experiments, sleepless nights, and notebooks filled with ideas no one else believes in. But within those struggles lie the seeds of the technologies that transformed societies, connected continents, extended human life, and redefined what is possible.
The tale of invention begins not with success, but with failure. Thomas Edison recorded thousands of failed attempts at creating the perfect filament for his bulb. Yet when he was accused of wasting time, he famously replied that he had not failed thousands of times. He had simply discovered thousands of ways that did not work. The deeper truth, seldom told, is that many of those failed ideas were later used by others in completely different technologies. Nothing in the world of invention is ever truly wasted. Even mistakes illuminate new paths for future minds. In the chapters that follow, we will journey through stories buried beneath textbooks and overshadowed by legends. These stories reveal how the compass, the camera, the computer, the vaccine, and countless other inventions emerged from unexpected places and unrecognized individuals. They show the human side of invention, the doubts, the motivations, the heartbreaks, and the flashes of insight that cannot be explained by logic alone. Genius is not a straight path, it is a labyrinth. And the stories hidden inside that labyrinth tell us more about human creativity than the inventions themselves ever could. The first chapter ends with a simple reminder. Every great invention began as an invisible spark, a fragile glimmer in the darkness. Before the world celebrates an idea, it ignores it. Before an inventor is honored, they are often doubted. And before a creation becomes iconic, it is merely an experiment, born in the shadows, shaped by hands no one sees, and guided by a mind that refuses to surrender. The hidden architecture of human progress is built not only by the famed names etched into textbooks, but also by the quiet minds whose ideas drifted through history like whispers.
Their brilliance was not always recognized, and their journeys were rarely celebrated. Yet their contributions shaped the world with the same force as the giants of innovation. In this chapter, we follow the lesser-known inventors whose ideas, though overlooked, formed the silent backbone of iconic inventions. Their stories reveal the delicate balance between recognition and obscurity, and show how genius often grows in the margins, unnoticed until its impact becomes impossible to ignore. In the late 16th century, as Europe wrestled with plague, poverty, and political upheaval, a young man named Galileo Galilei picked up a crude Dutch spyglass and began to reshape humanity's understanding of the universe. Yet behind Galileo's celebrated astronomical observations lies the story of the anonymous Dutch spectacle maker, likely Hans Lippershey, who crafted the first telescope while simply trying to sell children's magnifying toys. His device was not intended for science, discovery, or history. It was a commercial curiosity, a novelty meant to attract customers. But in the eyes of Galileo, it became a doorway to the cosmos. The transformation of the telescope from toy to instrument of revelation illustrates how invention often accelerates when ideas pass between minds, each seeing something different in the same object. The hidden architect of this monumental discovery never received the recognition Galileo did. Yet without him, the chapters of astronomy might have unfolded very differently. The story of invention repeatedly proves that the world remembers the person who popularizes an idea, not always the one who creates it. In the early 1800s, when Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, she imagined a scientist animating lifeless matter with electricity. Yet long before this fictional tale, real-life experimenters like Giovanni Aldini were electrifying the limbs of executed prisoners in public demonstrations. These strange spectacles, unsettling yet mesmerizing, laid the groundwork for modern neurology. Aldini's legacy was overshadowed by the fictional scientist he never met, even though his experiments formed the roots of our understanding of electrical impulses in the human body. History often favors stories over facts, and in this case, an imaginative novelist became more widely associated with the concept of reanimating life than the scientist who explored the real boundaries of electricity and biology. As the world stepped into the Industrial Revolution, inventions grew at a pace previously unimaginable. But scattered among the inventors whose names appear in bold letters today were countless individuals whose stories remain hidden in footnotes. One such figure was Margaret Knight, a factory worker in Massachusetts who created the machine that cut, folded, and glued flat-bottom paper bags, a design still used globally. Knight, brilliant yet uneducated, sketched her ideas on scraps of cardboard and metal, guided by sheer instinct. When a man attempted to steal her design, arguing in court that no woman could possibly create such a machine, she fought not only for her invention, but for her identity as a creator. Her victory marked a rare moment in history when a forgotten inventor refused to remain forgotten, though the world still remembers her far less than the products she revolutionized. Her story reveals the hidden barriers that often separated inventors from recognition, barriers built not on merit, but on prejudice.
Across the ocean in Scotland, a quiet bookkeeper named John Loudon McAdam devised a simple method of layering crushed stone to create smooth, durable roads. He was not an engineer by training, nor did he seek fame. His goal was merely to solve the practical problems of travel he witnessed daily. Yet his creation, macadamized roads, became the foundation of modern highways. Cars, trucks, and the entire global transportation system owe a debt to a man whose name now survives only in the words tarmac and macadam. terms used casually without knowledge of the person behind them. Innovation often becomes so integrated into daily life that the inventor disappears beneath the convenience they created. Hidden stories also lie behind inventions shaped by tragedy. One example is the origin of modern anesthesia. In the early 19th century, surgery was a brutal, terrifying ordeal. Patients screamed and thrashed while surgeons worked as quickly as possible to minimize agony. Yet a dentist named Horace Wells, watching a public demonstration of nitrous oxide, realized its potential to dull pain. Despite early promise, his experiments faltered in front of critics, and he was dismissed as a fraud. His reputation crumbled, and he died without witnessing the global adoption of anesthesia that would spare millions from suffering. The world later credited others, but the quiet seed of the idea had come from Wells. His fate reminds us that failure in the eyes of society does not always reflect the true impact of an idea. Sometimes the hidden architects of invention are not individuals but entire cultures. The indigenous peoples of North America developed syringes from hollow bird bones, rubber from tree sap, and snow goggles from carved bone centuries before Europeans arrived. These innovations often entered Western knowledge stripped of their origins, credited instead to explorers or scientists who merely observed them. The world adopted tools and techniques without acknowledging the hands that crafted them. To uncover the full story of invention, we must look not only at patents and laboratories, but at ancient traditions, community knowledge, and cultural ingenuity. Innovation is rarely the act of a single mind. It is a continuous exchange across time and generations. In the early 20th century, as electricity spread across cities, the groundwork for electronic communication was being laid by a man whose name is often overshadowed, J.C. Bose. Working in India during the British colonial era, Bose conducted groundbreaking research in radio waves and semiconductors long before the world celebrated Marconi or the creators of the transistor. Yet he refused to patent his inventions, believing that knowledge should be shared freely. This choice, noble but costly, allowed others to build upon his discoveries without crediting him. His hidden genius re-emerged decades later when historians uncovered the extent of his contributions. Bose's story teaches us that recognition is not always the goal of innovation, but its absence can distort our understanding of history.
Even well-known inventions often have hidden origins. The story of the typewriter, for instance, is usually associated with Remington or Sholes, yet dozens of early prototypes existed before them, some created by a blind inventor who hoped the machine would help him communicate more easily. The modern refrigerator is linked to mechanical engineers, but its earliest concepts came from scientists studying the physics of evaporation and indigenous techniques of cooling clay pots. The evolution of an invention is rarely a straight line. It is a network of overlapping ideas, forgotten attempts, and unnoticed breakthroughs that eventually converge into something transformative. In this second chapter, we explore a central truth about invention. Progress is a collective endeavor. While a single name may become associated with an iconic creation, that invention often represents the invisible labor of many. The hidden architects of innovation may not appear on the first page of history, but their contributions remain etched into the technologies and conveniences of the modern world. Their creativity, perseverance, and quiet determination remind us that genius exists in every corner of society, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. The chapter closes with the recognition that invention is not solely about brilliance. It is shaped by circumstance, opportunity, privilege, and visibility. Many who could have changed the world never had the tools, education, or freedom to do so. Their stories remain lost, yet their potential lingers as a silent testament to the countless geniuses history never uncovered.
As we move forward into the next chapter, we will step closer to the dramatic turning points where iconic inventions made their breakthrough. But we must carry with us the memory of the hidden minds who laid the foundation. For behind every celebrated genius stands a long lineage of quiet, forgotten innovators who shaped the impossible long before the world was ready to believe in it.
History celebrates the meticulous planners, the tireless researchers, the inventors who chase their ideas with relentless focus. But beneath the polished surface lies a stranger truth. Many of humanity's most transformative inventions were never planned at all. They emerged from mistakes, accidents, and unexpected twists of fate. In this chapter, the story of innovation takes on a chaotic rhythm shaped by unintended sparks that reshaped entire civilizations. These accidents reveal not the certainty of genius, but the unpredictable nature of discovery, where fortune and failure dance together in ways no one can fully control. The story begins in a cluttered laboratory in 1928, where Alexander Fleming returned from vacation to find something alive in the petri dishes he had carelessly left on his workbench. Mold, green, fuzzy, and seemingly useless, had contaminated the bacteria he was studying. At first, it annoyed him. It was the kind of mishap any scientist might dismiss with irritation. But when he leaned closer, he noticed a ring around the mold where the bacteria had died. Something in the mold was fighting the infection. In that moment of unexpected clarity, penicillin was born. But the hidden truth is that Fleming himself did not know how to purify or mass-produce it. For years, his discovery sat quietly in scientific journals until other researchers recognized its potential and turned it into the medicine that saved millions of lives. The accident had opened the door, but it took many unseen hands to carry penicillin into the world. Accidental discoveries often begin as inconvenience. In 1945, Percy Spencer, an engineer working with radar equipment, noticed that the chocolate bar in his pocket had melted during an experiment with magnetrons. Curious rather than alarmed, Spencer placed popcorn kernels beside the device and watched them burst into fluffy white pieces. The microwave oven emerged from a moment of personal surprise, not a carefully designed experiment. It was a reminder that sometimes genius lies not in the accident itself, but in the willingness to pay attention to what the accident reveals. But the roots of accidental innovation stretch far deeper than modern laboratories. Centuries earlier, Chinese alchemists searching for immortality stumbled upon an explosive mixture of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal. Their goal had been eternal life, but instead they created gunpowder, an invention that shaped empires, warfare, and global political landscapes. The irony is almost haunting. An attempt to escape death resulted in a formula that brought destruction on an unprecedented scale. This contradiction reflects the unpredictable consequences of invention. The outcome often diverges wildly from the inventor's intention.
Consider also the story of vulcanized rubber. In the 1830s, Charles Goodyear was obsessed with stabilizing natural rubber, which became brittle in winter and sticky in heat. His experiments bordered on desperation. He even ended up in debtor's prison. One day, while demonstrating his mixture to a skeptical group, he accidentally spilled the rubber onto a hot stove. Instead of melting or hardening uselessly, it transformed into a durable, elastic material. This moment of pure accident created the foundation for modern tires, shoes, and countless industrial products. Yet Goodyear himself never escaped poverty or hardship. The world would later remember his name through a tire company that had no direct connection to him. But the man behind the invention died without seeing the full impact of his accidental discovery. Accidents are not always sudden. Sometimes they grow slowly, unnoticed, until a curious mind observes something different. In the early 19th century, a French photographer named Nicéphore Niepce was experimenting with light-sensitive chemicals. His goal was to create permanent images, something humanity had dreamed of but never achieved.
In one experiment, Niepce used a material that hardened under sunlight. When he exposed a metal plate to the light coming through his window, the pattern remained etched into the surface. It was not the invention of photography as we know it, but it was the first permanent photograph, born from a mixture of trial, guesswork, and accident. Niepce's technique was imperfect and required extremely long exposure times, but it paved the way for Louis Daguerre and later inventors to refine the process. The first photograph in history was a moment captured not through intention alone, but through the unpredictable reactions of chemicals in sunlight. Some accidental discoveries emerged not from curiosity, but from sheer frustration. In the 1850s, Alfred Nobel, known today for the Nobel Prizes, was desperately trying to stabilize nitroglycerin, an unstable explosive prone to deadly accidents. In one shipment, a container broke, spilling nitroglycerin onto sawdust. The mixture became stable, and dynamite was born. Ironically, Nobel's intention had been to create something safer, yet dynamite would later be used in both construction and warfare. This duality, creation and destruction, runs through many accidental inventions, reminding us that discoveries are shaped not only by scientific potential, but by how humanity chooses to use them. In the late 19th century, another unexpected breakthrough appeared in the hands of a young engineer named Hertha Ayrton. She was studying the flickering of electrical lamps, and during her experiments, she noticed that certain shapes created stable airflow patterns. Her research laid the foundation for the modern electric fan, but it also had a far greater impact during World War I. Ayrton's simple observations about airflow were used to design devices that dispersed toxic gas from trenches, saving countless soldiers' lives. Her accidental insights transcended their original purpose, proving that even the smallest discoveries can ripple outward into history.
The pattern repeats. Invention often hides in places no one expects. When a chemist named Roy Plunkett opened a gas cylinder in 1938, he discovered that the substance inside had unexpectedly polymerized into a slippery white solid. That solid would become Teflon, a material with uses ranging from cookware to space technology. Similarly, when a scientist left a batch of synthetic rubber exposed to sulfur chloride, the result was a sticky mess he thought was useless. But that mistake would later lead to the creation of modern adhesives. Even sweetness has an accidental story. Saccharin, one of the first artificial sweeteners, was discovered when a chemist forgot to wash his hands after working in the lab and noticed a strange sweetness on his fingers during dinner. His carelessness led to an invention that would reshape the food industry. Yet accidental discoveries are not purely scientific phenomena. They are deeply human stories. They reveal the role of timing, environment, and the inventor's personalities. The difference between a useless mishap and a world-changing breakthrough often lies in whether someone pauses to ask, why did that happen? The accident itself is merely the beginning. The genius lies in what comes next. In many cases, accidental inventions emerged from the intersection of different disciplines. When the geologist William Smith noticed repeating layers of rock across England, he wasn't trying to create the first geological map. He was simply trying to dig canals more efficiently. His observations, however, revealed the history of the Earth preserved in stone. The map that resulted from this accident of attention became the foundation of modern geology. It demonstrated that accidents can occur not just in laboratories, but in the natural world, waiting for a perceptive mind to interpret them. The deeper meaning of these stories lies in what they reveal about human creativity. Genius is often portrayed as a linear path: goal, experiment, success. But the truth is far more chaotic. Innovation thrives in environments where mistakes are allowed, curiosity is encouraged, and minds remain open to surprise. The inventors who changed the world were not simply clever,
They were attentive, adaptable, and unafraid to embrace the unexpected. It ends with a reflection on the unpredictable nature of progress. The inventions that emerged from accidents remind us that the world is not shaped solely by intention. It is shaped by chance, by error, by the strange, unpredictable interactions between matter, energy, and the human mind. The spark of genius does not always appear when and where it is expected. Sometimes it hides inside the crack of a petri dish, the heat of a stove, the spill of a container, or the forgotten mess of a laboratory bench. As we move forward into the next chapter, the story shifts from accidental discoveries to the intense rivalries and competitive ambitions that fueled some of the greatest innovations of all time. The world of invention is not only shaped by chance, it is shaped by conflict, determination, and the fierce desire to be the first to touch the future.
Innovation has never been a peaceful journey. The stories passed down through history often present invention as the triumph of a single genius working late into the night, far removed from conflict or competition. But the true history of invention is littered with rivalries, fierce battles fought in laboratories, workshops, courtrooms, and boardrooms. These rivalries shaped not only technologies, but also the reputations of the inventors who created them. In this chapter, we delve into the heated conflicts, the stolen ideas, the dueling personalities, and the unspoken hostilities that forged some of the greatest inventions the world has ever known. Perhaps the most famous rivalry in the history of invention began with a battle over light itself. Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla, two men with vastly different personalities and philosophies, found themselves locked in a war that would shape the future of electricity. Edison, a practical businessman with a talent for commercialization, championed direct current. Tesla, a visionary dreamer with a brilliance unmatched in his era, believed alternating current was superior. The clash between them was not merely scientific, it was ideological. Edison launched public demonstrations showing the dangers of Tesla's system, even supporting the use of AC to power the electric chair. Tesla responded not with aggression, but with relentless innovation, pushing forward despite financial ruin. In the end, alternating current became the global standard, validating Tesla's genius, but Edison's name remained far more prominent in history. Their rivalry revealed a harsh truth. The world does not always reward the visionary. Sometimes it rewards the one who controls the narrative. This pattern repeats throughout history. In the late 19th century, two inventors raced to capture motion on film. Thomas Edison, again at the center of controversy, claimed the invention of the motion picture camera through his kinetograph. But a man named Louis Le Prince had built and tested a functioning camera months earlier. Just as he prepared to present his invention to the world, Le Prince mysteriously disappeared from a train, his prototype and documents lost with him. Many suspected foul play, even corporate sabotage, but no evidence ever surfaced. Edison went on to dominate early cinema technology, while Le Prince's name faded into obscurity. The rivalry ended not in victory, but in tragedy. A reminder that the battle for innovation can sometimes swallow those caught in its path. The world of aviation saw a similar conflict. The Wright brothers are celebrated as the pioneers of flight. Yet across the Atlantic, Alberto Santos Dumont was soaring through the skies of Paris, demonstrating flight publicly, while the Wrights worked in secrecy. The debate over who flew first has persisted for over a century, fueled by nationalism, pride, and conflicting documentation. The Wrights patented their designs aggressively, often stifling competitors rather than collaborating with them. Santos Dumont, on contrast, made his inventions open and free for anyone to use. His generosity cost him recognition, but his contributions shaped aviation nonetheless. These rivalries show that history does not always remember the most generous, only the most strategically documented.
In the field of communication, rivalry again played a central role. The invention of the telephone is widely attributed to Alexander Graham Bell, but another inventor, Elisha Gray, filed a similar patent on the same day. Rumors circulate to this day that Bell had access to Gray's design through loopholes in the patent office. Whether true or not, Bell's name was immortalized, while Gray's contributions became a footnote. The feud between them continued for decades, shaping legal battles and business empires. Their rivalry demonstrated the cutthroat nature of technological advancement, where timing mattered as much as creativity. Even the computer revolution, which transformed the modern world, grew from bitter conflict. During World War II, a brilliant British mathematician named Alan Turing built the early foundations of computing through his work on code-breaking machines. Yet after the war, another inventor, John von Neumann, published the architecture that would become the blueprint for all modern computers. Von Neumann's design built upon ideas pioneered by Turing, yet for decades, Turing's contributions were concealed under government secrecy. What history celebrated as a single architectural breakthrough was, in truth, the result of overlapping ideas, collaborations, and suppressed rivalries. The silence surrounding Turing's role was not merely accidental, it was enforced by the very institutions that benefited from his genius. Rivalry can fuel progress, but it can also destroy inventors. The story of Philo Farnsworth, a young farm boy who invented the first fully electronic television system, captures this perfectly. His innovation was revolutionary, yet he found himself pitted against the powerful RCA Corporation, led by David Sarnoff. RCA claimed ownership over Farnsworth's ideas, arguing that no farm boy could have created something so advanced. The legal battles drained Farnsworth emotionally and financially. RCA eventually adopted his technology, and although Farnsworth won the legal rights, the victory felt hollow. The stress consumed him, and though the television became one of the most influential inventions of the 20th century, Farnsworth lived a troubled life, rarely receiving the recognition he deserved. His rivalry with RCA is a stark example of how corporate power can overshadow individual genius. In medicine, rivalries often emerged from competition to cure deadly diseases. Jonas Salk and Albert Sabin publicly clashed over their polio vaccines. Salk's injectable vaccine came first, saving millions of lives. But Sabin criticized it fiercely, advocating for his oral vaccine as the superior solution. Their feud extended into scientific conferences, public debates, and global politics. Both vaccines eventually became essential tools in eradicating polio, yet the rivalry between their creators highlighted the intense pressure scientists face when human lives are at stake. In the race to cure disease, collaboration could save lives, but rivalry often took precedence.
Even everyday objects carry stories of bitter conflict. The invention of the zipper involved decades of competing designs, broken patents, and rival inventors racing to fix one another's flaws. The ballpoint pen, too, saw war between Laszlo Biro and American manufacturers who tried to replicate his design without permission. Countless modern tools, from the fountain pen to the sewing machine, originated from competitive battles among inventors who often lived parallel lives, working separately on the same idea, driven by the same frustrations, unaware of each other until patents collided. These stories reveal a deeper truth about invention. Creativity alone is rarely enough. Ambition, strategy,
timing, and sometimes sheer luck determine whose name will be remembered. The battles fought over ideas can be as intense as any war, fueled by pride, fear, and the desire to shape the future. Some rivalries bring out the best in inventors, pushing them to achieve extraordinary breakthroughs. Others break spirits, erase contributions, or bury geniuses beneath the weight of more powerful personalities. Yet rivalry is not inherently destructive. It can ignite innovation, drive individuals beyond their limits, and force inventors to refine their ideas. The competition between Apple and Microsoft revolutionized personal computing. The feud between Kodak and Polaroid shaped instant photography. And the modern race for space exploration between governments, corporations, and visionary entrepreneurs continues to push humanity toward new frontiers. This chapter ends with a sobering realization. History is written not only by the innovators, but by those who win the battles surrounding innovation. The inventions we cherish today are shaped by both brilliance and conflict, by inspiration and rivalry. The next chapter will shift away from conflict and move into the realm of bold visionaries, those who imagined worlds that did not yet exist and created inventions that transformed those visions into reality.
Some inventors respond to necessity. Some stumble upon discovery by accident. Some fight through rivalry and conflict. But there is another type of genius. Those rare individuals who saw a future the world was not yet ready to imagine. Their minds wandered beyond their era, dreaming up ideas so advanced that society often dismissed them as madness. This chapter explores the visionaries whose inventions were born not from the present moment, but from a future only they could see. Their stories reveal how imagination can be just as powerful as knowledge, and how the boldest innovations often begin as impossible dreams. The story begins with Leonardo da Vinci, who lived in the 15th century, yet dreamed as if he were living 500 years ahead. In his notebooks, hidden from the world for centuries, he sketched flying machines, armored vehicles, parachutes, diving suits, and even mechanisms resembling robots. None of these devices were built in his lifetime, partly because the materials and technology did not exist yet. But the ideas were there, carefully drawn by a mind that refused to be caged by time. Leonardo's visions were so far ahead that the world only began to understand them when the Industrial Revolution made them possible. His inventions remind us that genius sometimes manifests not in what can be built today, but in what can be imagined long before it becomes real. Another visionary whose ideas leaped beyond her era was Ada Lovelace. Working beside Charles Babbage in the 1800s, Ada imagined something extraordinary, a machine that could perform tasks not merely through arithmetic, but through symbolic logic. At a time when the word computer meant a human being who performed calculations by hand, Ada predicted a world where machines could compose music, create patterns, and execute instructions automatically. Her notes, longer than the original paper she annotated, became the first description of a programmable computer. The world did not understand her. For nearly a century, her ideas lay dormant, dismissed as theoretical fantasies. Yet today, every modern computer, from smartphones to supercomputers, operates on principles she described. Ada Lovelace saw the future before anyone else could imagine it. Another mind shaped by the future was Nikola Tesla. While it explored his rivalry with Edison, that conflict represented only a fragment of Tesla's vast imagination. Tesla envisioned wireless communication long before the first radio broadcast. He dreamed of transmitting electricity without wires, of handheld devices that would allow people to communicate instantly across continents. He imagined self-driving cars, remote control machines, and global information networks,
ideas so advanced that even visionary investors found them impractical. Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, intended to beam wireless energy across the world, was abandoned due to financial troubles. But the concepts he proposed became reality in the 20th and 21st centuries, from Wi-Fi to smartphones to wireless charging.
The future also appeared vividly in the mind of H.G. Wells, who is often remembered as a novelist but deserves recognition as a technological prophet. In his books, he predicted atomic bombs, automatic doors, aerial warfare, laser weapons, and even genetic engineering. His fiction became the blueprint for countless innovations. George Orwell drew from Wells, scientists drew from his fantastical descriptions, and engineers were inspired by his imagined devices. Wells himself believed that fantasy was simply the future waiting to be understood. His ideas show how fiction can become a catalyst for invention, blurring the line between imagination and reality. Sometimes a visionary sees the future because they stand outside the expectations of their society. In the mid-1800s, an African-American inventor named Granville Woods envisioned a safer rail system that used electromagnetic communication. He created the synchronous multiplex railway telegraph, allowing moving trains to send signals to stations. His invention predicted modern wireless transportation communication systems. Yet due to racial prejudice, Woods constantly fought challenges from competitors who claimed he lacked the intelligence to create such devices. Thomas Edison himself attempted to take credit. Woods refused to surrender, winning patent battles again and again. Though history largely overlooks him, Granville Woods imagined a modern transportation network before the world knew it needed one. Another visionary, Hedy Lamarr, appeared in the glamorous spotlight of Hollywood, yet her mind was rooted in innovation. During World War II, she sketched a system of frequency-hopping signals to prevent enemy ships from jamming torpedoes. Her design, created with the help of composer George Antheil, was so advanced that the U.S. Navy ignored it at first. Decades later, the same principles became the foundation for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GPS. Lamarr's story shows that the future does not always emerge from laboratories. Sometimes it comes from the mind of an actress who simply refused to be underestimated. The future also flickered in the imagination of a young man named Alan Turing. Turing did not just imagine computers, he imagined intelligence itself. He proposed the idea of machines that could think, learn, and mimic human reasoning. His Turing test remains one of the foundations of artificial intelligence. At a time when computers filled entire rooms and could only perform basic calculations, Turing saw beyond hardware. He saw a world where machines could speak, solve problems, and possibly even feel. His ideas were so far ahead that even his colleagues struggled to grasp them. Only after his death did the world begin to understand the potential of his vision. Today's AI systems, capable of processing language, analyzing data, and learning from experience, stand on the foundations he built.
Visionaries do not always start with grand ideas. Sometimes they begin with simple frustrations. In the 1960s, Douglas Engelbart became obsessed with finding ways to help humans interact with computers more naturally. While most saw computers as mathematical tools, Engelbart imagined them as partners in thinking. He created the first computer mouse, hypertext links, and early versions of interactive screens. His work, demonstrated in the legendary Mother of All Demos in 1968, predicted nearly every aspect of modern computing, from video conferencing to graphical interfaces. Yet he received little recognition during his lifetime. The computer industry moved forward using ideas Engelbart had already mapped decades earlier. Similarly, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, working in a garage in the 1970s, envisioned a computer that belonged in every home, not just universities or corporations. Their vision shaped Apple's early innovations and helped transform personal technology into a cultural force. But their future-driven thinking was not unique. Around the same time, J.C.R. Licklider imagined a galactic network of interconnected computers, which became the conceptual foundation of the Internet. His memo describing global information sharing reads today like a prophecy fulfilled. What makes these visionaries extraordinary is not only their imagination, but their willingness to pursue ideas others found impossible. They straddled two timelines, the world they lived in and the future they envisioned. This duality often came at a price: misunderstanding, resistance, financial ruin, or obscurity. Society rarely embraces ideas too far ahead of their time. The gap between vision and acceptance can stretch across decades or even centuries. The chapter ends with a reflection on the nature of visionary genius. These individuals lived in the future long before it arrived. Their inventions were not shaped by the world around them, but by the world they believed could exist. They remind us that the boundary between imagination and invention is thin, and that the future often begins as a single dream in the mind of someone who refuses to think like everyone else.
There are inventions that astonish the world the moment they appear. Light bulbs that outshine night, airplanes that lift humanity into the sky, computers that transform entire civilizations. Yet some inventions slip quietly into human life, becoming so familiar that people stop noticing them entirely. These are the invisible inventions, the tools and technologies woven so deeply into daily existence that their origins fade into the background. They shape how we work, how we travel, how we communicate, how we think, and even how we survive. Yet the inventors behind them rarely receive the recognition they deserve. Part 6 explores the hidden stories behind these everyday miracles and reveals how the simplest ideas can change the world forever. The story begins with one of the most ordinary objects imaginable, the safety pin. A small, coiled piece of metal, unremarkable in appearance, yet essential in countless moments, from a child's clothing repairs to emergency fixes on wedding dresses. The safety pin's inventor, Walter Hunt, created it in 1849, not because he sought to improve clothing or create a new sewing tool. He invented it simply to pay off a $15 debt. Hunt twisted a bit of wire, added a clasp to prevent pricking, and accidentally created an object that would survive for centuries. He then sold the patent for a meager sum, missing out on the fortune it later generated. His casual invention became indispensable to households around the world, but Hunt himself faded quietly into history, remembered by almost no one. Even more invisible is the humble match, an object so commonplace that people rarely think about its absence. Before matches, fire required skill, patience, and often luck. But in 1826, an English chemist named John Walker accidentally scraped a stick coated with chemicals, causing it to ignite in a sudden burst. He had stumbled upon the friction match. Walker never patented his invention because he thought it too trivial to protect. Yet his small discovery transformed human life, making fire portable, quick, and safe. Matches would go on to ignite stoves, lanterns, factories, and revolutions. Walker's name barely survived in textbooks, but his invention changed the rhythm of civilization. Invisible inventions also appear in the realm of measurement. The metric system, for example, feels like a natural part of life. Meters, grams, liters, but it was once a radical idea. During the French Revolution, scientists sought a universal, rational system that would free society from the arbitrary measurements inherited from medieval times.
The meter was defined using the Earth's meridian. The kilogram came from a prototype metal sphere. The inventors intended to reshape thought itself, replacing chaos with order. Their work was scientific, political, and philosophical at the same time. But today, the metric system is so deeply integrated into modern life that few remember the bold experiment that created it.
In the world of communication, the invention of the typewriter shifted the speed of writing and reshaped offices, literature, journalism, and bureaucracy. Yet its origins were fragmented, with dozens of prototypes emerging across different countries. Some early typewriters were developed by inventors who wanted to help the blind read. Others came from engineers, fascinated by mechanical motion. The typewriter, once revolutionary, eventually became so common that it almost disappeared into the background, only to re-emerge as the ancestor of the modern keyboard, the interface through which humanity now speaks to machines. Every email, message, and search query rests upon the invisible legacy of the typewriter. The toothbrush, one of the simplest yet most essential tools for health, also has an obscure past. Before its invention, people used sticks, feathers, or cloth to clean their teeth. In the 18th century, an English prisoner named William Addis, sitting in a jail cell, carved a piece of bone and attached bristles to it, creating the first modern toothbrush. After his release, he began producing them commercially, launching a product that would eventually become a global necessity. Addis never imagined that his prison-made tool would shape human hygiene for centuries. Today, billions of toothbrushes exist worldwide, yet the story of the man who created them is almost forgotten. The invention of the ballpoint pen tells a similar tale. Prior to its creation, fountain pens leaked constantly, frustrating writers everywhere. Laszlo Biro, a Hungarian journalist, noticed that newspaper ink dried quickly and wondered if such ink could be used in a pen. With his brother, a chemist, he developed a tiny rolling sphere that transferred ink smoothly onto paper. The result was the ballpoint pen, cheap, durable, and reliable. But Biro fled his homeland during World War II, and his invention was commercialized by others. Today, billions of ballpoint pens are used every day, yet only a fraction of people know the name of the man who created them. Invisible inventions also include the mechanisms that keep the world functioning silently in the background. Consider the escalator, invented by Jesse Reno in the late 1800s. Reno envisioned moving staircases that would help people ascend effortlessly in public spaces. His early models were crude and experimental, but they captured the imagination of architects. Over time, escalators became essential to malls, airports, and train stations, so integrated into infrastructure that people rarely think about the genius behind them. The escalator transformed public architecture by making building design vertical rather than horizontal, reshaping cities without attracting much fame. Running water, something so basic today, was once unimaginable. Ancient civilizations built elaborate aqueducts, but modern plumbing emerged from countless incremental advances, many made by unknown craftsmen. The flushing toilet, often misattributed to Thomas Crapper, evolved through a chain of inventors, each improving the mechanism. Indoor plumbing revolutionized health, sanitation, and city planning, yet its inventors remain largely invisible because their creations became too ordinary to celebrate.
The story of invisible inventions extends beyond physical objects to systems and processes. The shipping container, invented by Malcolm McLean in the 1950s, transformed global trade by standardizing cargo transport. Before containers, goods had to be loaded and unloaded piece by piece, a slow and expensive process. McLean's simple idea to use identical metal boxes that could be moved seamlessly between ships,
trucks, and trains ignited the modern era of globalization. The world economy changed dramatically, yet McLean's name is barely known outside industry circles. His invention became invisible precisely because it worked too well. It blended into the background of modern life. Another invisible yet transformative invention is the barcode. In the 1970s, engineers developed a simple pattern of lines that could be scanned by lasers to identify products instantly. The barcode revolutionized retail, inventory management, and logistics, making modern supermarkets and global supply chains possible. Yet few people know the inventors, Norman Woodland and Bernard Silver, who created the first version of this system. The barcode's silent efficiency makes it easy to overlook, but its impact on the global economy is immeasurable. Even in the digital age, invisible inventions shape daily life. Algorithms determine search results, recommend videos, translate languages, and route traffic. They are the logical descendants of earlier invisible inventions. Simple ideas expanded by complexity until they vanish into the fabric of society. But behind each algorithm lies a story, a mind, a moment of insight that changed the structure of human experience. It ends with a powerful realization. Not all inventions seek glory, and not all inventors crave recognition. Some ideas slip quietly into the world, becoming so familiar that they cease to feel like inventions at all. Yet these invisible creations often shape human life more profoundly than the grandest machines or the loudest breakthroughs. They remind us that genius does not depend on spectacle. Sometimes it hides in the ordinary, waiting for an attentive mind to notice how extraordinary it truly is.
Human history is a story of individuals finding ways to bridge distances, geographical, emotional, cultural, and intellectual. If early humans invented tools to shape their environment, later generations invented tools to shape their relationships. Communication is the invisible thread that binds societies together, and the inventions that transformed it fundamentally altered the course of civilization. It explores the evolution of communication technologies, the hidden minds behind them, the struggles that shaped them, and the profound consequences that emerged when humanity learned to speak across time and space. The journey begins with a simple yet revolutionary invention, the alphabet. Before writing, knowledge existed only in memory, fragile and easily lost. Ancient civilizations carved symbols into stone, clay, bone, and metal, trying to record their thoughts. The earliest writing systems were complex, accessible only to trained scribes. But the alphabet, emerging from ancient Phoenician seafarers, simplified writing into a small number of characters representing sounds. This leap democratized literacy, allowing ideas to be shared more widely. No single inventor can be credited with the alphabet. It evolved across cultures, shaped by anonymous hands. Yet without it, every communication tool that followed, from the printing press to the smartphone, would have been impossible. Centuries later, paper transformed communication again. For hundreds of years, China guarded the secret of papermaking. When it spread through the Silk Road into the Islamic world and eventually into Europe, it replaced fragile parchment and expensive vellum. Paper became the vessel for knowledge, allowing books, letters, maps, and drawings to flow across continents. Its invention was simple in appearance, pulp, water, pressure, but monumental in consequence. Then came Johannes Gutenberg's printing press, a creation that amplified human communication beyond anything imaginable at the time. Gutenberg did not invent printing or movable type individually. Those existed in China centuries earlier. But he combined techniques in a way that revolutionized mass production. His press turned books from rare treasures into accessible objects. The hidden truth, however, is that Gutenberg's invention nearly ruined him financially. He borrowed heavily to finance his dream, lost control of his workshop, and died in obscurity. Yet his press sparked the Renaissance, fueled scientific progress, and shifted power away from the elite toward a more literate public. It was a silent revolution disguised as a mechanical device. Fast forward to the 19th century, when communication leaped forward with Samuel Morse's telegraph, a machine that converted words into electrical signals. Morse, originally a painter, turned to invention after personal tragedy, receiving news of his wife's death too late to attend her funeral. This moment of grief propelled him into a lifelong obsession with rapid communication. The telegraph began as a fragile experimental device and grew into a continent-spanning network that reshaped politics, journalism, and warfare. Yet Morse's code, the rhythm of dots and dashes, was perfected with help from collaborators who rarely received recognition. Communication now traveled faster than people themselves, collapsing distance into wires.
The next revolution came with Alexander Graham Bell's telephone. Though second chapter explored its hidden rivalries, the emotional origins of the invention are central to understanding its impact. Bell's lifelong exposure to hearing impairment in his family shaped his fascination with sound. The telephone was born not from technological ambition, but from a desire to help the deaf. Ironically, the invention that connected millions around the world came from an effort to lift silence from one family. When Bell spoke the first words, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you," he unknowingly opened a new era in human intimacy. Voices could now travel miles instantly, carrying emotion, tone, and personality. The world suddenly felt smaller. As technology progressed, inventors sought to combine sound with distance in new ways. Guglielmo Marconi pushed wireless communication across oceans, proving that radio waves could carry signals through the air. His work built on research by J.C. Bose and others, whose contributions were overshadowed by colonial bias and corporate power. Radio transformed entertainment, news, and national identity. Families gathered around radio sets to listen to music, speeches, and serialized dramas, sharing experiences with millions of unseen listeners. A new kind of community emerged, one connected not by location, but by frequency. Then came television, the invention that merged sight and sound. Yet television's origins are more chaotic than its polished screens suggest. Multiple inventors, Philo Farnsworth, Vladimir Zworykin, John Logie Baird, worked simultaneously on different versions. Farnsworth, the farm boy whose early idea came from plowing straight lines in Idaho soil, envisioned scanning images electronically. Baird experimented with spinning discs and flickering mechanical lights. Zworykin refined electronic tubes. Their competing technologies merged slowly into the modern television. Behind the scenes were patent wars, corporate manipulation, and personal heartbreak. But the outcome was extraordinary. Humanity gained the ability to watch events unfold as they happened. Wars, celebrations, sports, tragedies, uniting entire nations in shared moments. Communication entered a new dimension with the invention of the computer and the birth of the Internet. In the mid-20th century, computers were giant machines used for calculations, but visionaries like Alan Turing, Vannevar Bush, and J.C.R. Licklider imagined something more, a global network of thinking machines. In laboratories and university basements, engineers began connecting computers through primitive cables. ARPANET, the ancestor of the Internet, was not built for social connection, it was meant for research collaboration and military data routing. But once the network grew, it developed its own life. Email appeared unexpectedly as programmers began messaging each other across campuses. Forums emerged, digital libraries expanded, communication transformed again.
The personal computer, championed by innovators like Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, Bill Gates, and countless lesser-known engineers, brought computing power into homes. For the first time, ordinary people could create documents, send messages, and explore digital worlds. Keyboards replaced pens, screens replaced paper. The boundaries of communication dissolved. The final revolution of the modern age came with smartphones. Combining the telephone, computer,
camera and internet into a pocket-sized device, smartphones reshaped not only communication, but human behavior itself. The iPhone, Android platforms, and mobile networks carried forward decades of hidden innovations, from touchscreens to compact processors to global positioning satellites. These inventions formed an invisible ecosystem built by thousands of engineers whose names are known only within technical circles. Yet their work redefined what it means to be human in the 21st century. Always connected, always informed, always within reach of others. The evolution of communication technologies shows a clear pattern. Each invention shrinks the distance between people, reshapes society, and shifts power. But it also raises questions. Does increased connection bring understanding or confusion? Does faster communication deepen relationships or dilute them? Every innovation in this chapter brought both progress and complications. The telegraph spread information instantly, but also accelerated misinformation. Radio united communities, but became a tool for propaganda. Television brought entertainment, but also shaped perception. The Internet democratized knowledge, but also fragmented reality. Smartphones gave freedom, but created dependence. The chapter ends with the understanding that communication inventions are not merely tools, they are mirrors reflecting the best and worst of humanity. They connect, divide, empower, distract, enlighten, and overwhelm. Yet without them, civilization would remain fragmented, silent, and isolated. The story of communication is the story of humanity learning to extend its voice. In the next chapter, we turn to another powerful category of invention, the tools that saved lives. These are the inventions born from compassion, crisis, and the unyielding human desire to survive.
Human history is filled with creativity, ambition, rivalry, and brilliance. But above all, it is filled with the instinct to survive. From the earliest days of civilization, people invented tools not for fame or wealth, but to protect their communities from disease, injury, hunger, and death. Yet the inventions that saved lives often emerged from struggle, suffering, and sacrifice. Many of their creators worked in obscurity, often facing doubt, ridicule, or even danger. Part 8 reveals the untold stories behind medicine, sanitation, health, and safety. Innovations that transformed not only individual lives, but the fate of entire civilizations. The story begins thousands of years ago, long before modern science existed. Ancient civilizations experimented with herbal remedies, surgical tools, and healing rituals. But the first truly transformative life-saving invention was something deceptively simple: clean water systems. In ancient Rome, aqueducts carried fresh water across vast distances, and their sewer systems removed waste, preventing epidemics that ravaged less advanced regions. These innovations were not created by famous inventors, but by teams of engineers, slaves, architects, and workers whose names were never recorded. Their contributions reveal a truth that echoes throughout history. Sometimes the inventions that save the most lives are created by people history never remembers. Centuries later, during a devastating cholera outbreak in 19th century London, physician John Snow made a revolutionary discovery. People believed cholera spread through bad air, but Snow suspected contaminated water. Ignoring ridicule, he painstakingly mapped the outbreak and traced it to a single water pump on Broad Street. When the handle was removed, the epidemic rapidly declined. Snow had effectively invented modern epidemiology, proving that waterborne diseases could be stopped through sanitation.
His work saved millions of lives in the decades that followed, yet during his lifetime, the medical establishment dismissed him. The life-saving power of clean water, drainage, and sanitation emerged not from glory, but from quiet persistence. As the world industrialized, new dangers appeared. Injuries in factories, contaminated food, infectious diseases spreading rapidly through cities. Inventors turned their attention to medicine. One of the most important breakthroughs came from an accidental discovery: vaccination. In the late 18th century, Edward Jenner observed that milkmaids who had contracted cowpox were immune to smallpox, a deadly disease that had devastated the world for centuries. He proposed a radical idea: deliberately infecting people with a mild disease to protect them from a severe one. At the time, the concept was met with horror. Critics called it unnatural, dangerous, even monstrous. But Jenner persisted, and the results were undeniable. His method eventually became the foundation of immunology. Smallpox was eradicated globally in 1980, the first human disease ever eliminated, thanks to an idea that began with skepticism and fear.
Another life-saving revolution came from a young Hungarian physician named Ignaz Semmelweis. In the mid-1800s, childbirth clinics across Europe experienced shockingly high mortality rates due to childbed fever. Semmelweis noticed that doctors would perform autopsies and then deliver babies without washing their hands. He introduced a simple practice: hand washing with disinfectant. The mortality rate dropped dramatically. But instead of being celebrated, Semmelweis was mocked, rejected, and ultimately institutionalized. His discovery only gained acceptance decades later, after Louis Pasteur proved germ theory. Semmelweis died believing the world had ignored him. Yet today, every hospital, surgeon, and medical student follows the protocol he pioneered. Hand washing, simple, invisible, has saved more lives than almost any other invention in history. Louis Pasteur himself played a monumental role in transforming medicine. His research proved that microscopic organisms cause disease, revolutionizing medical science. His pasteurization process prevented foodborne illnesses. His vaccines saved millions. But Pasteur's work was shaped not by ambition alone. He lost multiple children to disease, and this personal grief fueled his determination to understand infection. Behind some of the world's greatest medical breakthroughs lies the pain of those who refuse to accept suffering without searching for a solution. Surgery, once a brutal and dangerous practice, transformed through two life-saving inventions: anesthesia and antiseptics. In Boston, dentist William Morton demonstrated the use of ether to render patients unconscious during surgery. The medical world was stunned. No longer would people have to endure unbearable agony while knives cut into living flesh. Yet Morton, like many inventors, faced ridicule and lawsuits. Some accused him of sensationalism. Others tried to steal credit. Meanwhile, Joseph Lister introduced antiseptic procedures, using carbolic acid to disinfect surgical tools and wounds. His patients healed without infection, a miraculous change from earlier times when surgeries often led to death. Lister's idea spread slowly, meeting resistance from doctors unwilling to accept new practices. But eventually, antiseptics became standard, and modern surgery became possible. As medicine advanced, inventors began to explore diagnostic technologies. Wilhelm Röntgen accidentally discovered X-rays while experimenting with cathode tubes. When he saw the bones of his own hand projected on a screen, he realized he had created a tool that could see inside the human body without cutting it open. His discovery shocked the world. Yet the hidden truth is that early X-ray experimentation exposed researchers to dangerous radiation, and some suffered lifelong health damage. Their sacrifice paved the way for radiology, CT scans, mammography, and countless medical imaging technologies that save lives each day.
In the early 20th century, as epidemics continued to threaten global populations, scientists raced to create antibiotics.
Fleming's discovery of penicillin, later developed by Florey and Chain, ushered in a new era of medicine. Suddenly, infections that once killed millions, pneumonia, syphilis, tuberculosis, strep throat, became treatable. Penicillin saved countless soldiers during World War II, transforming the tide of battle and changing the future of medicine. Yet Fleming received the most recognition, while Florey, Chain, and the countless lab workers who perfected mass production remained overshadowed. The invention that saved millions was not the work of one man, but of an entire network of scientists. Another life-saving innovation emerged not from a lab, but from human compassion. The invention of the modern ambulance system by Dominique Jean Larrey during Napoleon's wars revolutionized emergency care. Larrey observed soldiers dying unnecessarily because they were left on the battlefield until combat ended. He created flying ambulances, fast, mobile medical units that rescued wounded soldiers within minutes. His system laid the groundwork for modern emergency medical services. Larry's invention was born not from technology, but from empathy, proving that sometimes the greatest innovations emerge from the urge to protect human life. In more recent times, inventions like seatbelts, airbags, traffic lights, and smoke detectors have quietly saved millions of lives. These tools are so ordinary that people rarely consider their origins. Seatbelts evolved through decades of engineering, resisted by car companies that feared reduced sales. Smoke detectors were invented out of necessity after a researcher suffered from a lab accident involving toxic fumes. Traffic lights emerged from a railway signaling engineer seeking to prevent collisions. These simple systems have prevented more deaths than many dramatic medical breakthroughs. The invention of defibrillators, pacemakers, insulin therapy, dialysis machines, and organ transplantation all emerged from a combination of scientific curiosity and the deep human desire to save others. Behind each invention lies a story of experimentation, failure, fear, hope, and persistence. Many of these pioneers risked their own health, their reputation, even imprisonment. Some died before their ideas were accepted. It ends with the recognition that the inventions which save lives do not only belong to the laboratories or the operating rooms, they belong to the quiet heroes who refuse to accept suffering as inevitable, who look at human vulnerability not with despair but with determination. Their inventions shaped the modern world in ways we often forget, because the greatest life-saving technologies are those that become so trustworthy, so integrated, so normal that they vanish into everyday life.
Humanity has always sought not only to survive, but to express, to create, and to experience beauty. Culture is the soul of civilization, and throughout history, inventions have reshaped how people tell stories, make art, preserve memory, and understand the world. Some inventions expanded imagination, others preserved it, others changed the very meaning of creativity. Yet behind the tools that built culture lie forgotten inventors, quiet experiments, and the hidden evolution of ideas. The tale begins with one of the earliest cultural inventions, musical instruments. From the first bone flutes carved thousands of years ago to the drums made from stretched hides, early humans used sound to connect with one another, signal danger, celebrate events, and soothe spirits. The bone flute, found in ancient caves in Germany, reveals that humans were making music more than 40,000 years ago, long before the invention of the wheel or agriculture. No single inventor crafted these tools. They emerged from collective necessity, ritual, and curiosity. Music became the first technology that united tribes emotionally, giving rise to rhythm, song, and storytelling. As civilizations grew,
Instruments evolved into masterpieces of engineering. The Chinese guqin, the Indian sitar, the Persian ni, and the African kora shaped their culture's musical identities. In ancient Greece, the lyre became a symbol of poetry and intellect. The hidden inventors behind these instruments were artisans, blacksmiths, farmers, shepherds, ordinary people who sought extraordinary beauty. But one instrument changed global culture more profoundly than any other: the piano. Its invention began with frustration. In the 1700s, harpsichords could not vary volume based on how hard keys were pressed. An Italian craftsman, Bartolomeo Cristofori, wanted a keyboard instrument that could play both loud, forte, and soft, piano. His invention, the gravicembalo col piano e forte, became the modern piano. At first, it received little attention. Few recognized its potential. But as composers like Mozart, Beethoven, and Chopin embraced it, the piano became an emotional language, shaping centuries of music. Cristofori died before his invention reached greatness, yet his quiet craftsmanship changed world culture forever. Visual art, too, underwent revolutions brought on by invention. The creation of pigments allowed early artists to decorate cave walls, while innovations in sculpture tools led to breathtaking stone and bronze masterpieces. But one of the most transformative cultural inventions was the camera. Humans had always tried to capture reality through painting, sculpture, and drawing, but photography changed everything.
The camera obscura, an early device that projected images onto surfaces, had existed for centuries. But in the 1820s, Nicéphore Niepce created the first permanent photograph, and Louis Daguerre refined the process. Their inventions froze time, preserved memory, and democratized visual history. Suddenly, portraits were no longer luxuries for royalty. Ordinary families could capture their lives. Photography also transformed science, journalism, and art. The world began to see itself through new eyes, from wars photographed on battlefields to expansive landscapes preserved in silver. Yet Niepce died before gaining recognition, and Daguerre's fame overshadowed his partner's pivotal role. Art's evolution continued with the invention of film. Motion pictures emerged not from a single inventor, but a web of overlapping ideas. Muybridge's photographic motion studies, Maret's chronophotographic gun, Edison's kinetoscope, the Lumiere brothers' cinematographer. Each innovation built upon the last. Film became a cultural revolution, turning storytelling into a visual world of movement, light, and emotion. Through cinema, humanity learned to witness fantasies, tragedies, and dreams in shared spaces. Hollywood became an empire, but behind its glamour lay inventors who struggled financially, fought legal battles, or died unknown. Print culture also experienced a renaissance through the creation of the typewriter. While explored earlier, its cultural consequences deserve deeper attention. Typewriters allowed writers to produce work faster, more legibly, and with fewer errors. This accelerated journalism, literature, bureaucracy, and global communication. Figures like Mark Twain were early adopters, realizing that writing itself was changing. The rhythm of thought, the pace of creativity, the flow of words. The typewriter subtly reshaped human expression. Yet perhaps the invention that most deeply altered cultural identity was the phonograph. Thomas Edison initially imagined his device as a tool for recording business dictation, not music. But when the first recorded voices played back, people were stunned. For the first time in history, sound became permanent. The phonograph captured music, speeches,
laughter, and language, preserving them beyond the moment of creation. Composers, singers, and musicians suddenly had access to audiences they could never meet. Cultural traditions could be archived instead of fading into memory. The phonograph gave birth to the modern music industry, and with it, new forms of art, jazz, blues, pop, all carried across continents by spinning discs.
Another profound cultural invention was the printing press's child, the modern novel. Though not a device, the novel emerged because printing made storytelling accessible to the masses. Don Quixote, often considered the first modern novel, reshaped imagination by blending fantasy, comedy, and social satire. As printing spread, so did literacy, giving rise to genres, authors, and ideas that shaped identities worldwide. People began to see themselves reflected in characters, themes, and human struggles. Culture became portable. In the 20th century, inventions like radio and television connected global audiences. But another form of cultural expression emerged that would redefine humanity's relationship with reality: video games. Early programmers created simple digital games as experiments, but soon these evolved into immersive worlds filled with narrative, art, and interactivity. Video games transcended entertainment, becoming a new form of storytelling where players shaped the plot through choices. Behind the scenes were programmers working late nights, artists designing characters, and inventors creating engines that blended imagination with mathematics. Their work shaped a global cultural phenomenon. Another cultural revolution came with the invention of sound amplification and electric instruments. The electric guitar, refined by innovators like Les Paul, transformed music forever. Rock and roll emerged, challenging norms, shaping politics, and giving voice to youth movements. Music became a tool of rebellion, identity, and social change, all because inventors pursued new ways to manipulate sound. The invention of the Internet, explored earlier, had immense cultural consequences as well. It created digital communities, revived lost languages, expanded human creativity, and allowed countless people to share their stories. YouTube amplified unheard voices. Social media turned ordinary individuals into creators. Online platforms revived ancient crafts, enabled new art forms, and dissolved cultural boundaries. Yet this digital expansion also brought challenges: misinformation, isolation, and loss of traditional practices. Inventions that connect also fragment, shaping new realities that humanity is still learning to navigate. Another cultural invention often overlooked is the creation of standardized time. Before railroads, time was local. Every town set its own clock. But as transportation and communication accelerated, chaos arose. The invention of time zones by Sir Sandford Fleming in the 19th century unified global schedules, reshaping travel, work, and culture. Suddenly, entire societies synchronized their lives. Time itself became an invention, influencing everything from factory shifts to international broadcasts. The evolution of fashion also owes its existence to inventions. The sewing machine, created through overlapping effort and conflict, allowed clothing to be manufactured at incredible speed. This democratized fashion, transforming clothing from necessity to cultural expression. Zippers, elastic fabric, synthetic dyes, all inventions that expanded creativity and identity. It ends with the understanding that culture is not static. It is built, shaped, and reshaped by invention. Every brushstroke, every melody, every photograph, every film, every sentence written or spoken carries within it the legacy of inventors who expanded the boundaries of human expression. The inventions that transformed culture do more than entertain. They help humanity define itself.
The story of invention has always been a story of human daring,
of people who imagined more than reality offered, who refused to accept limits, and who sensed possibilities invisible to everyone around them. As we reach the final chapter of this journey, we step from the past and the present into the uncertain realm of the future. Though tomorrow's inventions remain unwritten, their seeds already exist, in laboratories, in dreams, in the imaginations of children, in failures waiting to become discoveries, and in the overlooked corners where genius often hides. It explores the unfolding frontier of innovation, the hidden forces shaping what comes next, and the minds whose ideas will define the next era of humanity. The future begins with energy, the force that drives civilization. For centuries, humanity relied on fire, wind, and muscle. The industrial age shifted to coal, oil, and electricity. But the future points towards something more radical: clean, limitless energy. In laboratories around the world, researchers work obsessively on nuclear fusion, a process that mimics the sun itself. Fusion promises a world where energy is abundant, clean, and accessible to all. Yet the invention of stable fusion is not the result of one genius, but a global tapestry of physicists, engineers, and dreamers. Their progress comes slowly, through frustration and breakthroughs so subtle they barely make the news. Behind the scenes are young scientists working late nights, writing equations on whiteboards, adjusting magnetic fields, and hoping that one spark will ignite a new age. Another frontier lies in artificial intelligence, an invention born not in the 21st century, but in the mind of Alan Turing decades earlier. AI has already reshaped industries, medicine, communication, and creativity. But the next era of AI will not simply answer questions or analyze data. It will partner with humans, amplify imagination, and perhaps develop forms of reasoning that extend beyond biological limits. The inventors shaping this future remain mostly unknown. Programmers writing quiet lines of code in dimly lit rooms, researchers annotating datasets by hand, and designers questioning what it means for a machine to understand. The future of AI is not one invention, but a constellation of thousands of small discoveries. As technology advances, humanity's relationship with the body itself begins to change. Medical pioneers now develop gene editing tools like CRISPR that can rewrite DNA, potentially curing inherited diseases that once doomed families for generations. But these tools carry moral questions, risks, and unknown consequences. The inventors working on genetic editing often feel the weight of responsibility more heavily than any scientists before them. Their discoveries can reshape evolution. Their failures can affect entire populations. They walk a fragile line, guided by both hope and caution. Meanwhile, engineers push the boundaries of robotics, designing machines that walk, run, climb, and even think. But the next revolution is not in creating robots that mimic humans. It is in creating robots that augment human ability. Wearable exoskeletons now help paralyzed individuals walk. Robotic limbs respond to neural signals. Tiny surgical robots navigate the human body with precision surgeons could once only dream of. Yet the inventors behind these breakthroughs often remain anonymous technicians, their contributions dispersed across global teams.
The future of communication also expands into realms once thought impossible. Brain-computer interfaces, devices that translate thoughts directly into signals, promise a world where people communicate without speaking, typing, or touching a screen. Early prototypes already allow individuals who cannot move their limbs to control digital devices through intention alone. In labs around the world, scientists listen to electrical patterns in the brain, trying to decode the language of thought. Their work blends neuroscience, computer science, psychology, and hardware engineering.
Their discoveries could redefine what it means to express oneself. Transportation, too, stands on the edge of transformation. The dream of flying cars, once confined to science fiction, inches closer to reality through electric air taxis, autonomous drones, and vertical takeoff vehicles. But perhaps more revolutionary is the revival of an old idea: ultra-fast vacuum tube travel, exemplified by Hyperloop-style systems. Engineers envision capsules traveling hundreds of miles per hour through low-pressure tunnels, shrinking distances between cities. These systems require inventors who think like physicists, architects, and futurists simultaneously. Yet the future is not only technological, it is deeply human. Social innovators search for ways to preserve culture. Sustainability pioneers design biodegradable materials to replace harmful plastics. And educators reimagine learning for a generation born into the digital age. Some of these inventions appear humble: new farming techniques, water purification devices, affordable housing solutions. But their impact may surpass even the grandest technological innovations. The most important invention of the future may be one that humanity has attempted countless times but never perfected: resilience. As climate change intensifies storms, floods, droughts, and rising seas, inventors search for solutions to protect vulnerable populations. New desalination technologies aim to turn oceans into drinkable water. Vertical farms grow food in skyscrapers using minimal land. Smart cities harness sensors and algorithms to reduce waste, improve safety, and optimize energy. Behind each of these ideas are inventors who understand that the future must be sustainable, or it will not be a future at all.
But the future of invention also brings new questions. How will society balance innovation with ethics? How will it protect privacy in a world of constant connectivity? How will humans define identity when machines learn, create, and possibly feel? The inventors shaping tomorrow must not only build new tools, they must imagine new systems, new values, and new forms of humanity itself. The chapter ends not with answers, but with possibility. Tomorrow's iconic inventions may come from minds living today, people who are experimenting quietly, failing repeatedly, questioning boldly. The future genius may be someone working unnoticed in a small workshop, someone conducting late-night experiments in a university lab, someone sketching impossible ideas in a notebook, someone overcoming poverty or adversity, someone whose name the world has not yet learned to pronounce. Just as history is filled with forgotten heroes, the future will be shaped by voices not yet heard. The story of invention is never finished. It is a living river of imagination flowing from the past into the future, shaped by every human hand that dares to change the world. The hidden stories of iconic inventions remind us that genius often emerges in the shadows, but its light illuminates generations. And as long as humanity continues to dream, fail, create, and believe, the next great invention is already on its way, waiting to be discovered.
And that brings us to the end of today's journey through history. If you enjoyed exploring the ancient world with me, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories from the past. See you in the next episode.